there is what I consider to be a reasonably entertaining heavyweight matchup that has somewhat slipped under the radar, taking place in Germany on the 20th of December. The reason I say reasonably entertaining is it's involving two fighters who many people will know, but in a matchup where it's probably quite hard to pick the winner. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in my experience, that's quite a novelty in the heavyweight division. Obviously, the prospects are so valuable, and anyone who's classed as a contender is so valuable, getting that opportunity to be heavyweight champion of the world, that in my experience, you get products like Deontay Wilder, for example, who gets to 30 fights without having been in against real opposition, and will probably find that the first real guy he fights who actually poses a threat of beating him is called Klitschko. And therefore, it's always very interesting when you get a fight like, I'm trying to think of other good examples, perhaps Tyson Fury, Chisora, Adamek Cunningham, Hey Fury, where there was at least a competitive angle to the fight. And as I say, this one I think slipped somewhat under the radar. It is between Kevin Johnson and Christian Hammer. It might be Christian Hammer. I've heard his name pronounced differently by various commentators. Hammer is 26 years old, 14 wins, 10 by knockout, 3 losses. Kevin Johnson, slightly more mature, been in with, well, I suppose you could say a higher level of opposition, obviously, having fought at the highest level for the World Championship against Klitschko, also having been in with the likes of Tyson Fury, etc. Kevin Johnson, I think his record is 33 fights, 29 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest, or something to that effect, but I'll have to check it. The reason, I would imagine that Christian Hammer is the favourite and Kevin Johnson is being brought in as an opponent, but I think there are strong pros and cons in both men's favour, and I think it could turn out to be an interesting fight. I think interesting perhaps in a sort of tactical game of chess, purest sense of the word, because I know Kevin Johnson has at times been involved in fights which haven't been the most enthralling, and he's got his share of critics for the performance he put up against Vitaly Klitschko and obviously against Tyson Fury, where he barely won a round in the 24 combined. What I will say about Kevin Johnson is he's very experienced ring professional, got good sort of ring craft, above average jab for a heavyweight, and I think he's a top-class defensive fighter. He's never been stopped. You can say that he fought very negatively against Fury and Klitschko. What you can't say is that he looked like he was going to get sparked out, particularly at any stage, which is an achievement against Vitaly Klitschko. And going the distance against Vitaly is certainly something to be proud of, even bearing in mind the manner in which it was achieved. They both guys are recently coming off wins. Christian Hammer most recently, not in a recent fight, won against Leif Larson, which I think was very impressive form. Leif Larson had only had 1 loss, and that was to Odlanair Solis, who's very highly touted, highly rated, viewed as one of the main heavyweight threats. And although Solis won that fight, it was close. It really was a close fight, and whilst Solis wasn't at peak fitness, Larson seemed to cause various issues. He seemed incredibly durable. He looked like a tough guy. Obviously, there was some sort of fitness, stamina concerns, but he went the distance and performed with credit against Solis. And against Christian Hammer, it was surprising that Christian Hammer knocked him out in quite a brutal fashion. It's on YouTube and it's available to watch, but you can see that this wasn't like a sort of borderline knockout. This was a real heavy knockout here, and it was just interesting that Christian Hammer, someone who isn't perhaps anywhere near as highly rated as Solis, went in and literally sparked out an opponent who had caused Solis a few headaches along the way, and been taken the distance. I've I've watched a few other Hamer fights. I watched his fight against Danny Williams, where he caused Danny all sorts of bother, but Danny was well past it. I also watched his fight against Marius Wok, and it's important to remember with Hamer, he's someone who's been match tough from the start. You've got to bear in mind he's still a very, very young heavyweight at 26. Especially considering that he's had quite a few fights under his belt now. He lost his very first fight due to an injury. He fought Marius Wok, who at the time was 21-0, and someone who would go on soon to fight one of the Klitschko brothers. He fought Marius Wok in only his 8th fight, and he got stopped by quite a heavy knockdown in the 6th round of that fight, which is again on YouTube, and I'd recommend watching. So I'd say his positives are he's a much younger fighter than Kevin Johnson. He's only 26, as I say. He's coming off an impressive win against Leif Larson. He's got good punching power, and as I say, he'll probably be the favourite to win this fight, being the young man and having a decent victory over Leif Larson, who, as I say, was the fighter who solaced the distance. My concerns is he's a little bit of a plodder. He's very beatable. I mean, despite the fact I say he was match tough, the fact remains he was stopped heavily by Marius Wok, who was again sort of completely destroyed by Klitschko. Again, another very tough guy who went the distance, but it's hard to see him. It's very hard to say he won rounds against Klitschko. But he was, so we know there is a limit to Hamer's potential, but one would assume he'd have progressed since his 8th professional fight. His hand speed isn't electric. He's a little bit of a plodder. He reminds me slightly of a Ruslan Chigayev, or that kind of fighter. He sort of comes forward in straight lines. He's got an okay jab when he uses it, but sometimes he leads with a hook, and he's a bit of a messy fighter. But he's been match tough. He's in decent form, and he'll be coming to win good against Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson is an interesting one, because as I say, he's frustrating, and he's put in frustrating performances in the past. But at his best, he's decent. He's lost to Tor Hamer, no relation to Christian Hamer, in the prize fighter format. But I think it's very fair to say that a 3-round fight doesn't suit Kevin Johnson. He's not necessarily an explosive fighter, but he's a fighter who does go the distance. Whilst Christian Hamer has started to look quite tired, sometimes started to look like fitness may have been a bit of an issue. He looked very tired before stopping Leif Larson, in my opinion. We know that Kevin Johnson will be there for 12 rounds. And we know that at the end of his 12 rounds, his defences will still be sharp. This fight is actually, I keep saying 12 rounds, I should mention this fight is over a scheduled 10-round distance. But I think 10 rounds, when it gets to 6, 7, 8, even before 9, 10, Christian Hamer's fitness is really going to be tested. How prepared is he? How in shape is he? And we know Kevin Johnson will still be there and still be coming strong at that point. I don't think Christian Hamer is dynamic enough in coming forward. I think he goes in one direction, he plods a bit. He's not, he's not using his jab as regularly as he should have sometimes. I think he kind of doesn't have the class to sort of break down Johnson's defences. I mean, if Fury couldn't stop him, if Klitschko couldn't stop him, I do not expect Christian Hamer to be able to stop him. And despite his punching power, I just don't think... I think his power's there. I don't think he's necessarily dynamic enough in the way he boxes and the way he moves to be clocking Johnson and stopping Johnson. So I think that this will go to points. I think Johnson is very gifted defensively, and he's got a good chin. And I see it as a points fight. And this is where I find it interesting, because Christian Hamer wins most of his fights by knockout. He's someone who does get tired later on, and I think with Johnson coming on strong, if Johnson boxes smart, uses his jab, he can still win this. The Tyson Fury loss was a bad loss for Johnson, because in losing pretty much every round to Fury, he put himself a long way back in people's rankings, a long way back in people's mind, and a long way back as a serious proposition, as a contender. What's impressed me about him is he's come back, he's won a fight via 10th round knockout against a relative nobody. He then went to take on Odinez Solis. There was a fight scheduled, relatively recently, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I actually did a prediction video for that fight, but that showed it was a good fight for Johnson to take, because Solis is someone who has been known to turn up in bad shape, and a win over Solis would have done big things for Johnson. But Solis is really highly rated, highly touted, dangerous guy at his best, and the fact that Johnson went in with him, one would assume there was a paycheck involved, but it nonetheless showed that he had ambition to try and get back in with someone decent and try and steal a win. And the fact that he's whilst the Leif Larson form, obviously Solis went 12 rounds with Larson, and Hamer was able to stop him. So whilst that doesn't suggest that, I would view Solis as a talent well in advance of Christian Hamer. And I do think this fight will be an easier fight for Johnson than the Solis fight. My instinct is that Hamer will probably be favourite, and my thought is that it's a very tight fight. I don't see Johnson getting stopped. I see his defence as being sound. I see him being better skilled in terms of the jab and in terms of boxing know-how, and I think Johnson will win this in a close points decision. I don't expect it to be a thrilling fight in the sense that it'll be all action and massive haymakers going left, right, and centre. I think it'll be a really interesting tactical game of chess. I see both guys taking some rounds, and I do see it being a close fight, with Kevin Johnson coming out probably as a surprise winner in this one. I guess it depends what kind of boxing you're into, what kind of boxing you like. If you're someone who enjoys seeing first round knockouts, it's probably not going to be the fight for you. If you're someone who appreciates the sort of tactical element and jab and that sort of thing, it could be quite interesting. And the reason I bring it to attention by doing a video here is I think it's very rare to see a genuine sort of 50-50 fight in the heavyweight division. It's much rarer than in any other sort of weight division, and the winner of these guys there's a lot to win and a lot to lose here. The winner of these guys could probably get themselves in a real fight, like they could probably get an opportunity as an opponent for a top-rated contender, maybe even the likes of Bryant Jennings, Deontay Wilder, Chris Arreola, Bermain Stavern. It would be a chance to sort of be one fight away from almost a title. So if you win this fight, it puts you in the mix to fight one of the real contenders, and the winner of that obviously gets to fight with a champion. But I think this is a key fight for both guys, because the winner puts himself in a mix, the loser becomes an opponent. I think Johnson's hungry. I think I've read things he's put out recently, statements about getting in shape and training hard and being ready for Solis, and I just think he'll pull the win out of the bag here, and I would expect it to be an upset. I've had a quick look in terms of the bookmakers to see what prices they're quoting. Nothing available yet, but I will be monitoring it closer to the time, because I expect with Hamer's youth and recent knockout win, he will be favourite, and I'd probably be tempted to have a little look at Kevin Johnson if that is the case. Thanks for watching. Please leave your comments below. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on who's likely to win, and your thoughts on whether there's anything out there for these guys in the heavyweight division.